My name is Sophia Martinez, and this is the story of how my brother's arrogance and cruelty led to the most satisfying business acquisition I've ever been part of. It's also the story of how sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are the ones who give you the greatest motivation to succeed. Let me start at the beginning, because understanding our family dynamics is crucial to appreciating just how sweet this victory really was. My father, Carlos Martinez, started Martinez Construction in 1978 with nothing but a borrowed truck, a handful of tools, and an unshakable work ethic. He built the company from the ground up, literally pouring concrete foundations during the day and doing paperwork by lamplight at night. By the time I was born in 1985, Martinez Construction had grown into a respected regional contractor specializing in commercial buildings and residential developments. My brother Miguel was 3 years older than me, and from early childhood, it was clear that Dad intended the business to be a family legacy. Miguel and I both started working summers at the company when we turned 14, learning everything from basic construction skills to project management and client relations. But Miguel and I were completely different people, and those differences became more pronounced as we got older. Miguel was charismatic, confident, and naturally comfortable in leadership roles. He was the golden child who could charm clients at company barbecues and impress Dad's business partners with his quick wit and ambitious ideas. Miguel thrived on being the center of attention and loved the status that came with being the heir apparent to a successful family business. I, on the other hand, was quieter, more analytical, and infinitely more interested in the technical and operational aspects of the business. While Miguel was networking at industry events, I was studying construction management, learning new software systems, and developing relationships with suppliers and subcontractors. I loved the problem-solving aspects of construction projects and had a natural talent for logistics and process improvement. Dad appreciated both of our strengths, and for years, it seemed like we were building toward a partnership where Miguel would handle the business development and client relations while I managed operations and project execution. Dad often talked about how the combination of Miguel's people skills and my technical expertise would take Martinez Construction to the next level. But everything changed when Dad had his heart attack in 2019. Dad was only 63, but the stress of running a growing business had taken its toll on his health. The heart attack wasn't fatal, thank God, but it was serious enough that his doctors insisted he step back from the day-to-day operations of the company. Dad was facing a choice: sell the business or turn control over to his sons earlier than he had planned. Miguel immediately positioned himself as the obvious successor. He argued that his business development skills and established relationships with clients made him the natural choice for CEO. He presented Dad with a detailed plan for taking over the company, complete with growth projections and expansion strategies that looked impressive on paper. I supported Miguel's bid for leadership, honestly believing that we would work together as partners just like Dad had always envisioned. I thought my operational expertise would complement Miguel's leadership and that we'd build something even greater than what Dad had created. I was incredibly naive. Miguel officially became CEO of Martinez Construction in January 2020, and within 6 months, it became clear that his vision of partnership was very different from mine. Instead of treating me as a partner or even a valued team member, Miguel began systematically marginalizing me and undermining my authority within the company. He started making major operational decisions without consulting me, often implementing changes that directly contradicted systems and processes I had spent years developing. When I tried to discuss these issues with him, Miguel would dismiss my concerns or suggest that I wasn't seeing the bigger picture. The real problem started when Miguel began bringing in outside consultants and new management personnel to handle areas that I had been successfully managing for years. He hired a new operations director, a new project manager, and even a new head of purchasing, all positions that duplicated or superseded responsibilities I had been handling effectively. When I asked Miguel about these hiring decisions, he told me that the company needed professional management as it grew and that family employees couldn't be expected to handle every important role. The implication was clear. I wasn't professional or qualified enough to continue in my current capacity. But Miguel wasn't just marginalizing me professionally, he was also cutting me out of the financial picture. Dad had always intended for both Miguel and me to inherit equal shares in the company, but after Miguel took over, he began arguing that ownership should be tied to contribution and performance rather than just family relationship. Miguel convinced Dad to restructure the ownership agreement, reducing my stake from the planned 50% to just 25%, while Miguel retained 50% and Dad kept 25%. Miguel justified this change by arguing that as CEO, he deserved controlling interest and that my reduced role in the company warranted reduced ownership. I was hurt and angry, but I tried to accept the new arrangement and make the best of my diminished position. I told myself that 25% ownership in a successful family business was still valuable and that maybe Miguel's leadership would indeed take the company to new heights. I couldn't have been more wrong. Under Miguel's leadership, Martinez Construction began experiencing problems that we had never faced before. His aggressive expansion plans and flashy marketing campaigns were expensive and poorly executed. He signed contracts for projects that were beyond our capabilities, then scrambled to find subcontractors and resources to fulfill commitments he should never have made. Miguel's people skills, which had always been his greatest asset, turned out to be much better suited for winning new business than for managing complex projects and maintaining client relationships over time. Several major clients became frustrated with delays, cost overruns, and quality issues that stemmed directly from Miguel's poor project management and resource allocation. Meanwhile, the new management team Miguel had hired was creating chaos in our operational systems. The new operations director had no construction experience and implemented software and processes that were completely inappropriate for our industry. The new project manager was overpaid and underqualified, constantly making decisions that created problems for our field crews and subcontractors. I watched our family's companies struggling with problems that I knew how to solve, but every time I tried to offer suggestions or help, Miguel rebuffed my efforts. He seemed to view any input from me as criticism of his leadership, and he became increasingly defensive and hostile toward any suggestions for improvement. The situation reached a breaking point in late 2021 when we lost our biggest client, a property development company that had been working with Martinez Construction for over 15 years. The client terminated their contract with us after a series of miscommunications and project delays that could have been easily avoided with proper operational oversight. Losing that client represented nearly 30% of our annual revenue, and it triggered a cascade of financial problems that threatened the entire company. Miguel was forced to lay off 12 employees, including several skilled craftsmen who had been with Dad for more than a decade. I requested a meeting with Miguel to discuss the company's problems and offer my ideas for recovery. I had spent weeks analyzing our operational issues and had developed a comprehensive plan for streamlining our processes, reducing costs, and rebuilding client confidence. Miguel agreed to meet with me, and I naively thought he was finally ready to work together to save our family business. Instead, that meeting became the most humiliating and heartbreaking experience of my professional life. Miguel listened to my presentation for about 10 minutes before interrupting me with a dismissive wave of his hand. He told me that my ideas were unrealistic and showed a fundamental misunderstanding of modern business practices. He said that my focus on operational details demonstrated a lack of strategic thinking and leadership capability. Then he delivered the blow that changed everything. Miguel told me that the company's problems weren't caused by his management decisions, They were caused by my inability to effectively execute the operational responsibilities I had been given. He said that my failure to properly manage our construction teams and maintain quality standards had created the problems that led to losing our major client. None of this was true, of course. I had been increasingly cut out of operational decision-making, and many of the problems Miguel was blaming on me had actually resulted from decisions made by his new management team without my input or approval. But Miguel wasn't interested in facts or accountability. He was looking for a scapegoat, and apparently, I was the perfect candidate. The meeting concluded with Miguel informing me that my employment with Martinez Construction was being terminated, effective immediately. He said that my 25% ownership stake would be bought out according to the terms of our partnership agreement, but that my presence in the company was no longer beneficial to our family business. The word he used to describe my contributions was useless. He literally told me that my work had been useless and that the company would be better off without me. I sat in that conference room, the same conference room where Dad had held weekly family meetings about the business for decades, and felt my entire world collapse. This wasn't just about losing a job. It was about being rejected and humiliated by my own brother, cast out of the family business that I had helped build and had always expected to be my life's work. But the worst part wasn't even Miguel's cruelty or the injustice of his accusations. The worst part was realizing that he genuinely believed what he was saying. Miguel wasn't just being cruel. He actually thought I was incompetent and that my departure would solve the company's problems. I cleaned out my office that afternoon while Miguel watched from his doorway, making sure I didn't take any company property or confidential information. The employees who had worked with me for years were shocked and confused, but none of them dared to openly question Miguel's decision. Dad was out of town for a medical procedure, and Miguel had timed my termination to ensure that Dad couldn't intervene or object. By the time Dad returned and learned what had happened, Miguel had already changed the locks on my office and implemented new security protocols to ensure I couldn't access company facilities. When I finally spoke to Dad about the situation, he was caught between loyalty to both his sons and faith in Miguel's leadership judgment. Dad suggested that maybe some time apart would be good for everyone, and that perhaps I could find opportunities outside the family business that would allow me to develop my own career path. Translation: Dad was supporting Miguel's decision, whether out of conviction or just exhaustion from family conflict. That night, I sat in my apartment and tried to figure out what to do next. I was 36 years old, had spent my entire career working for my family's company, and had just been fired by my own brother for being useless. I could have looked for employment with another construction company, probably starting over at a much lower level despite my years of experience. I could have used the buyout money from my ownership stake to start my own small contracting business. I could have even left the construction industry entirely and tried to transfer my skills to a different field. Instead, I decided to do something that Miguel would never see coming. I decided to destroy him. Not out of pure spite or revenge, though those emotions were certainly part of my motivation. I decided to destroy Miguel's version of Martinez Construction because I knew it was destroying the company that Dad had built and that our family had worked so hard to create. Miguel's arrogance, poor management, and fundamental misunderstanding of our industry were going to kill Martinez Construction within 2 years. I could see the trajectory clearly. Continued client losses, mounting financial problems, and eventual bankruptcy or fire sale to a larger competitor. If someone was going to take down Martinez Construction, it might as well be someone who actually understood the business and cared about preserving Dad's legacy. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed resources, expertise, and connections that I didn't have as a newly unemployed former family business executive. That's when I remembered Chen. Marcus was the CEO of Pacific Development Group, a mid-sized construction and real estate development company based about 60 miles north of our market area. Pacific Development had been steadily expanding southward for several years, acquiring smaller construction companies and development properties throughout the region. Marcus and I had met at industry conferences and had developed a friendly professional relationship over the years. We had even discussed potential partnership opportunities between our companies, though those conversations had always been informal and theoretical. More importantly, Marcus was exactly the kind of sophisticated, strategic business leader that Miguel pretended to be, but actually wasn't. Marcus had an MBA from Stanford, had successfully grown Pacific Development from a small family business into a major regional player, and had a reputation for smart acquisitions and operational excellence. I called Marcus the day after Miguel fired me and asked if he had time for a confidential conversation about a potential business opportunity. Marcus agreed to meet with me that weekend, and I drove up to his office to present a proposition that was either brilliant or completely insane. I told Marcus everything: Miguel's mismanagement, the company's financial problems, the lost clients, and the operational chaos that was tearing apart Martinez Construction. I explained that Miguel's arrogance and poor judgment had created an opportunity for a well-executed acquisition that could give Pacific Development entry into our market area at a substantial discount. But I didn't just want to help Marcus acquire Martinez Construction. I wanted to partner with him to rebuild it into something stronger and more successful than it had ever been under Miguel's leadership. I proposed that Pacific Development acquire Martinez Construction through a leveraged buyout, with me providing inside knowledge about the company's assets, liabilities, and operational challenges. In exchange for my assistance and expertise, I would receive an equity stake in the acquired company and a leadership role in integrating it into Pacific Development's operations. Marcus was intrigued but cautious. He asked detailed questions about Martinez Construction's financial situation, client base, and growth potential. He wanted to understand not just the acquisition opportunity, but also my motivations and whether I could be trusted to work against my own family's interests. I was completely honest with Marcus about my emotional state and my desire for revenge against Miguel. But I also emphasized that my primary motivation was preserving the company that Dad had built and ensuring that Martinez Construction's employees and clients weren't destroyed by Miguel's continued mismanagement. Marcus spent 2 weeks conducting preliminary research on Martinez Construction, analyzing their public financial records, and reaching out to industry contacts for background information. What he discovered confirmed everything I had told him and revealed additional problems that even I hadn't fully understood. Miguel's aggressive expansion and poor project management had created cash flow problems that were worse than I had realized. The company was behind on payments to several major suppliers, had borrowed heavily against company assets, and was facing potential legal action from 2 clients who were claiming breach of contract and demanding damages. Most importantly, Marcus discovered that Miguel was actively shopping Martinez Construction to potential buyers, hoping to find someone willing to acquire the company before its financial problems became publicly known. Miguel was essentially trying to bail out of the family business, leaving Dad and the employees to deal with the consequences of his poor management. That information convinced Marcus that we needed to move quickly. If Miguel sold Martinez Construction to the wrong buyer, the company could be stripped for assets or absorbed into a larger competitor in a way that would eliminate jobs and damage Dad's legacy. Marcus proposed a strategy that was both elegant and ruthless. Pacific Development would approach Miguel directly with an acquisition offer that appeared to solve his immediate financial problems while giving him a face-saving exit from the family business. The offer would be structured to give Miguel a substantial cash payout and allow him to retain a small equity stake as a silent partner. What Miguel wouldn't realize until it was too late was that the acquisition terms included performance clauses and operational requirements that would give Pacific Development complete control over the company's management and strategic direction. Miguel would essentially be selling control of Martinez Construction while believing he was negotiating a partnership that would allow him to remain involved in company leadership. The beauty of this approach was that Miguel's ego and desperation would work against him. He would be so focused on getting cash to solve his immediate problems and so confident in his ability to charm his way into a favorable ongoing role that he wouldn't carefully analyze the long-term implications of the deal structure. Meanwhile, I would be positioned as Pacific Development's expert on Martinez Construction operations, giving me the authority to implement the changes needed to restore the company to profitability and operational excellence. Marcus and his legal team spent 6 weeks developing the acquisition proposal and conducting formal due diligence on Martinez Construction. The financial analysis confirmed that the company had significant underlying value despite Miguel's mismanagement, and that the right operational changes could restore profitability within 12 months. In February 2022, Marcus contacted Miguel directly and requested a meeting to discuss a potential business partnership. Miguel, who was becoming increasingly desperate about the company's financial situation, agreed to meet immediately. Marcus presented the acquisition proposal as a strategic partnership opportunity that would give Martinez Construction access to Pacific Development's resources, expertise, and market reach. He emphasized the cash infusion that Miguel needed to solve his immediate financial problems and suggested that the partnership could position Martinez Construction for rapid growth and expansion. Miguel was immediately interested. The prospect of solving his financial problems while maintaining his role as head of the family business was exactly what he had been hoping for. Marcus's sophisticated presentation and impressive track record convinced Miguel that this partnership could be his salvation. Over the next month, Marcus and Miguel negotiated the terms of the acquisition, while I provided background information and strategic advice to Pacific Development's team. Miguel was so focused on the financial aspects of the deal that he paid insufficient attention to the operational control provisions that would ultimately determine who actually ran the company. The final agreement gave Miguel a substantial cash payout, eliminated the company's immediate debt problems, and appeared to preserve his role as president of Martinez Construction. What Miguel didn't fully understand was that his authority would be subject to approval from Pacific Development's board, and that operational decisions would be made by a management team selected by Pacific Development. The acquisition was finalized in April 2022, and Miguel walked away with enough money to pay off the company's debts and fund his personal financial needs for several years. He believed he had engineered a brilliant solution that would allow him to remain in control of the family business while solving all his problems. He had no idea that I was the architect of his downfall. The integration process began immediately, and I was brought in as Pacific Development's Director of Operations for the newly acquired Martinez Construction Division. Miguel initially assumed I had been hired as a mid-level manager to help with the transition, and he seemed almost amused that I had found employment with his new business partner. It took Miguel about 2 weeks to realize that I wasn't just another employee. I was the person Marcus had chosen to run the day-to-day operations of the company Miguel thought he still controlled. The moment of recognition was absolutely perfect. We were in a management meeting discussing the integration timeline when Marcus announced that all operational decisions would be routed through me as the division director. Miguel looked confused at first, then asked Marcus to clarify my role and authority within the new structure. Marcus calmly explained that I had been his primary advisor throughout the acquisition process and that my expertise and knowledge of Martinez Construction operations made me the logical choice to lead the integration and turnaround efforts. I will never forget the look on Miguel's face when he realized what had happened. Confusion, then understanding, then rage, then a kind of helpless shock as he comprehended the full scope of what I had done. Miguel had fired me for being useless, and I had responded by engineering the acquisition of his entire company. Miguel tried to object, arguing that my involvement in the acquisition represented a conflict of interest and that my employment should be terminated immediately. Marcus politely but firmly explained that my role had been clearly established in the acquisition agreement and that Miguel's authority to make personnel decisions was now subject to Pacific Development's approval. In other words, Miguel could no longer fire me. In fact, as division director, I now had more authority within Martinez Construction than Miguel did. The next 6 months were both professionally satisfying and personally challenging as I worked to repair the damage that Miguel's mismanagement had caused to our family business. The first priority was rebuilding relationships with clients who had been damaged by poor project management and communication. I personally reached out to every client who had experienced problems under Miguel's leadership, acknowledged the company's failures, and presented detailed plans for ensuring that future projects would meet our traditional standards of quality and reliability. Several clients who had been considering terminating their relationships with Martinez Construction agreed to give us another chance based on the operational changes we were implementing and the resources available through Pacific Development. The second priority was rebuilding our internal operations and management systems. I eliminated the ineffective management positions that Miguel had created and restored the streamlined operational structure that had made Martinez Construction successful under Dad's leadership. This process involved some difficult personnel decisions, including terminating several employees who had been hired by Miguel but weren't contributing effectively to company operations. However, I was also able to rehire several skilled employees who had been laid off during the company's financial crisis. The third priority was reestablishing relationships with suppliers and subcontractors who had been alienated by Miguel's poor payment practices and unrealistic project demands. Pacific Development's financial resources allowed us to resolve outstanding payment issues and demonstrate our commitment to fair and reliable business practices. Within 6 months, Martinez Construction was operating more efficiently and profitably than it had in years. We had restored relationships with most of our traditional clients, secured several new contracts through Pacific Development's network, and rebuilt the operational systems that made us competitive in the market. Miguel struggled to adapt to his diminished role within the company he had once controlled. As a minority equity partner, he was entitled to information about company performance and had the right to attend board meetings, but he had no authority over day-to-day operations or strategic decisions. Watching Miguel try to assert authority he no longer possessed was both satisfying and somewhat pathetic. He would attempt to give directions to employees who had been instructed to report to me, or try to negotiate with clients who had been told that all business decisions were being made by the new management team. Several times, Miguel attempted to go around me by appealing directly to Marcus or other Pacific Development executives. Each time, he was politely but firmly reminded that operational decisions were my responsibility and that his role was limited to his equity position rather than active management. The most challenging aspect of the situation was managing my relationship with Dad throughout this process. Dad had initially been confused and hurt by the acquisition, feeling like he was losing control of the company he had built. But as the operational improvements became apparent and the company's financial situation stabilized, Dad began to understand that the acquisition had actually saved Martinez Construction from potential bankruptcy under Miguel's continued leadership. Dad and I had several long conversations about family, business, and the choices that had led to this outcome. He was proud of my success in engineering the turnaround, but he was also sad about the conflict between his sons and the way our family business had become a source of division rather than unity. I tried to help Dad understand that my actions weren't motivated by hatred for Miguel, but by love for the company Dad had built and determination to preserve his legacy. Miguel's mismanagement would have destroyed Martinez Construction within 2 years, and the acquisition was the only way to save the business and protect the employees who had devoted their careers to our family's company. The personal relationship between Miguel and me never recovered, and honestly, I don't think it ever could. Miguel believed that I had betrayed him and stolen his birthright, while I believed that I had saved the family business from his incompetence and ego. Miguel eventually sold his minority equity stake back to Pacific Development and moved to another state, where he found employment with a large commercial construction company. As far as I know, he's working as a project manager and seems to be successful in a role that matches his skills without requiring him to handle overall business leadership. I don't take pleasure in Miguel's professional setback, but I don't regret the choices that led to it. Miguel's firing of me was cruel, unjustified, and ultimately self-destructive. His inability to recognize his own limitations and work collaboratively with people who could complement his skills made him an ineffective leader who was damaging the company and its stakeholders. Today, 3 years after the acquisition, Martinez Construction is thriving as a division of Pacific Development Group. We've doubled our annual revenue, expanded into new market areas, and established ourselves as one of the premier commercial contractors in the region. More importantly, we've preserved the values and culture that Dad instilled in the company while updating our operations and capabilities for modern business requirements. Our employees are proud to work for Martinez Construction again. Our clients trust us to deliver quality projects on time and on budget, and our growth is sustainable and well-managed. I now serve as Regional Director for Pacific Development's Construction Division, with oversight responsibility for Martinez Construction and 2 other acquired companies. My role combines operational management with strategic planning, and I'm working directly with Marcus and other senior executives to develop Pacific Development's long-term growth strategy. Dad is officially retired but remains involved as a consultant and advisor to the company. He's proud of what we've accomplished and grateful that his life's work continues to thrive and grow. Most importantly, he's seen that the acquisition preserved not just the Martinez Construction name, but the commitment to quality, integrity, and employee welfare that defined his approach to business. The acquisition also created opportunities for advancement and professional development that wouldn't have existed under Miguel's leadership. Several longtime Martinez Construction employees have been promoted to management roles within Pacific Development, and the company's growth has created new positions and career paths for our team. Looking back on this experience, I realized that Miguel's cruelty and arrogance actually gave me the greatest opportunity of my professional life. Being fired forced me to think creatively about my career and led me to develop relationships and skills that I never would have pursued while working within the family business. Miguel called me useless, but his rejection pushed me to prove my value in ways that exceeded anything I could have accomplished as his junior partner in the family company. The acquisition of Martinez Construction wasn't just revenge. It was validation of my capabilities and vision for what the company could become. I learned that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are actually providing us with the motivation and opportunity to exceed their expectations and achieve success they can't imagine. Miguel's dismissive treatment of my abilities convinced him that I could never pose a threat to his leadership, which made him vulnerable to a strategy he never saw coming. The experience also taught me about the importance of building relationships and developing expertise that extend beyond family connections or inherited positions. My ability to engineer the acquisition depended on my professional relationship with Marcus, my understanding of the construction industry, and my willingness to take risks and work for goals that went beyond personal comfort. Miguel relied on his charm and family position to maintain his authority, but he never developed the substantive business skills needed to lead a company through challenges and growth. When those surface advantages weren't sufficient, he had no deeper capabilities to fall back on. Today, when I drive past the Martinez Construction headquarters that now displays the Pacific Development Group logo, I feel a sense of pride and satisfaction that goes beyond personal vindication. We saved the company, preserved jobs, protected Dad's legacy, and created opportunities for continued growth and success. Miguel thought he was getting rid of a problem when he fired me. Instead, he created the conditions for his own downfall and the salvation of the family business he was destroying. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being successful in ways that prove your critics wrong. But sometimes the best revenge is engineering their complete and total defeat while saving the things they were too arrogant and incompetent to protect. Miguel called me useless, so I bought his company. I think Dad would appreciate the poetic justice in that outcome, and I know he's proud that Martinez Construction continues to thrive and grow under leadership that understands both his values and the demands of modern business. The family legacy lives on, just not in the way any of us originally expected. And sometimes, that's exactly how the best stories unfold.